Hi, good morning, good afternoon. How's everybody doing?
Hi, Lynn. I'm doing fine. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you, Dan? Thanks for joining.
Uh, Thanks for hosting.
I
Th-
noticed this is new to me. Like I have to admit everybody. Is that new?
I think, hey, Lee, it is. It's funny. Zoom has changed several things. This industry is evolving rapidly, isn't it?
Definitely, yeah. Well, keep us employed on the bright side. Yeah, let me go ahead, share my screen. Get screen sharing working. All right, this is great. So let's bring up the agenda.
I think it's right behind that window.
Okay, I must have it somewhere. Yeah, right here. You're so right. All right. So release 1.6. Well, we have a couple of guys from the community can answer questions. What do you guys want to know about 1.6? I would say release is still on schedule. As far as I know, we are planning to have the release out next week. I believe it's early next week. It's harder to commit a time or day with any software delivery. You know, we're in the last few days to do final testing. I think we got a lot of testing done, but we just have a new release candidate out last night. So if you have time, would be much appreciated to try it out for us. I actually just try it myself. So I'm really impressed with our installation commands. It has this new thing where I think I was the one tweeted about I had trouble to remember Istio CTL manifest and apply, because to me when you install Istio, manifest apply just doesn't click to me. So finally the community agree with me, and then it's changed, so you no longer need to remember manifest apply. You can actually run install command and supply the installation Istio operator YAML as your installation YAML, and then boom, it actually shows you a nice status of your installation. As you can see, my installation failed, so I need to figure out why. But it's really nice that we actually have a simple command, and hopefully you don't have to look at our documentation to figure out how to install Istio, and we show you a nice status output. So I think the release is in good shape. I would like to take a pause to see what type of questions you guys are interested in 1.6.
What's your favorite new feature, Lynn?
Wow, that's a great question. I think there are many features I haven't had a chance to test, but this release, I've spent most of my time to deliver one single feature. It's a different deployment model for multi-cluster. So if you actually look at our documentation for multi-cluster today, let me go there quickly. So it's nice that it allows you to do, if you go to setup, install, and multi-cluster installation, we have two models, and I've been spending most of my time play with shell control plane, which works for single and multiple networks. I've spent most of my time in the release to actually work out a model where you could potentially run Istio control plane in one cluster. And on the second cluster, which is the remote cluster, you don't actually need to run the Istio control plane at all. So our prior instruction still tells you to run Istio control plane, but maybe you don't run it for the purpose of XDS serving, you run it for sidecar injector and CA. So in 1.6, we've introduced an experimental feature, allow you to completely run Istio control plane off the cluster you intended to run your data plane. So that's probably my favorite feature. We're still testing it out, but it's nice to be able to offer that deployment model to our users. There are many other exciting features in 1.6, like the multiple revision to be able to upgrade, point to which control plane version you wanted. I think that's cool. I personally haven't tried it other than seeing the demo. So the next few days, it's going to be really exciting to try some of these new features.
So there were some issues with the replicated control plane in 1.5.1. Were they fixed later, or do they still exist?
I know there were issue with shell control plane that was fixed. It was issued in 1.5 and it was fixed in 1.5.1.
Okay.
Replicate control plane, I haven't saw any issue being reported. I'm pretty sure we have people in the community actually tested both replicated and shared for 1.5.1. Certainly we're testing it again for 1.6. And one thing I'm really excited is there was this new guy, Steve Lander. He's actually writing automation tests for multi-cluster, specifically for shell control plane. So once that automation in place, hopefully with every single new release, we will be able to, make sure it's good before we release it.
Great. That sounds great. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. I just realized Brian Avery, who is our release manager for 1.6, is also on the call. So if you guys have any questions about 1.6, I'm sure Brian would be able to help us too.
Yeah, I'm here. Reach out if you have any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Brian, for all you do with the release team to get the release out on time yesterday. So that many of us are playing with it today. Very exciting.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's see if you guys, so that's the update for release 1.6. Somebody put on the agenda for this particular issue. Do we have any representative? My guess is no, because I think this issue was from somebody from China, and it's not really good for their time zone. So it's a long discussion. I'll summarize for everybody. So basically, they're interested in proposing to have Istio support a different type of proxy. Apparently, they have this new project. I don't even know how to pronounce it, MLSN, but it's kind of it's rewritten a proxy like Envoy by using Golang. And they want to ask if Istio can be a proxy, if users can run Istio with this MOSN as the proxy. I think this really needs to go to steering. Dan, you are here, and we actually had a couple of discussions here to see how we want to handle it. I mean, the community from the contributors, the maintainers, a couple of us chime in, we're not too excited to maintain another proxy. It's been overwhelming as a community just to keep up with Envoy. So we have to figure out what's the best way to provide to people who wants to run a different type of data plane. How can they be Istio compliant? Some type of notion. Does anyone have any questions on this?
Lynn, I know there are a number of other data planes that have sought to do something similarly, and I think some of them have been successful. The key is, though, that they're not necessarily supported by Istio. So we don't have test infrastructure or anything like that for them. They take on the responsibility and the load of maintaining compatibility with Envoy and Istio. And so that has worked in the past, if that's of interest to this person.
Yeah, it might be good to comment there. Well, I think the problem with that approach is like nothing's certified by Istio. So it's like they did all that work, but they still can't say, you know, they're certified to run all the Istio API.
Good point.
And I don't know if you got into, did you talk about WASM much yet? Sorry, I had a computer problem. Did you talk about WASM yet?
You mean for 1.6?
No. I mean for multiple data planes.
Oh, I see. You know, we didn't because yeah.
We in a sense we have taken a dependence on WASM possibly, right? Like with telemetry v2, we are running code in WASM that is essential for the reporting component at least. And you can imagine that WASM will become the kind of de facto method of integrating with Istio, and where we used to have the Mixer API. And so I don't know exactly how that would play out with a different data plane, if they would have to implement a WASM sandbox, or they would. It's not clear what you know how you would do those things. There was a comment in that issue thread from John Howard about, you know, some WASM could be written in Go, maybe that could run, but one of the benefits of WASM is people can write in different languages. So I think that is an interesting point, is that there might be some features that are kind of standard in Istio, but they're actually running in WASM, and if another data plane doesn't support it, then you don't get those features. And I don't know how that plays out, and how the community ends up feeling about those things.
Yeah, that's a good point, because that essentially means they have to write an equivalent of Istio telemetry v2 that works with their proxy, right? Especially if their proxy doesn't support WASM. If their proxy actually support WASM runtime, maybe it's possible to be compatible.
Right. Yeah. Like so in theory, and it's also possible that there is a partial compatibility, right? That you can say, well, we support certain aspects. We do we'll support the routing, etc., but we don't support other things. And so that's I think going to be the real difficulty, is the extensibility model. And the extensibility model has been important and a differentiator for Istio from the beginning. I like this idea in theory. We've talked about other data planes as well. You know, gRPC itself as a data plane, gRPC itself understands some of the XDS APIs now. So these alternate data planes are really interesting, but it is a deep and complex problem.
Yeah, I agree.
So Dan, is it fair to say, like, has the project or community really, sounds like there's interest in possible data planes, but has it either been like a design principle saying like, yes, we should support other data planes, or like explicit, like, no, that's an explicit non-goal, or is it kind of in the gray area between those?
It's more in a gray area. I remember back in the very, very beginning, some of the other data planes, a couple of the other well-known proxies did implementations, basically said, hey, we can implement the XDSC APIs. And we certainly didn't discourage them. We did make it clear, we think that we can add value by investing in one of these proxies. You know, we spend a considerable amount of time in Envoy, making Envoy better. And you know, like, we've addressed a lot of the performance problems in there, and certainly we as Google aren't going to spend time in, say, Nginx or in Linkerd, both of whom did these implementations at some point, right? So that said, we have also done some not anyone who's working directly on our team, but people at Google have spent time with gRPC saying, hey, it would be worthwhile to implement these. So it's not an express non-goal. Like, this isn't something we're trying to discourage, but it is a, like I said, it's a big problem. It's a complicated problem. And what might end up happening is you say, well, we support X, but not Y. And over time, maybe there's enough of these that we formalize that and we make it clear, oh, this is a certain kind of proxy. This is a full feature, you know, Envoy is a full featured proxy, extensible proxy, something. Yes, you know, one thing that made me think about this right away is we have people pinging us periodically about Windows, and Envoy is steadily making progress towards Windows support. But the first thing I thought when I saw this was, oh, what if it runs on Windows?
Yeah, just thinking out loud, it seems like there's the XDS protocol, which is on Envoy, and then there's kind of like the Istio constructs on top of it. And I'm wondering if those two concepts are starting to kind of like mush together in people's minds a little bit. Because gRPC now explicitly is supporting XDS.
Exactly, right.
That does not transitively mean like gRPC is like automatically Istio.
No, it can't do, and I think that gets to, at some point we might have to define a, you know, levels of compatibility or features. Yeah. And if you're using a we won't call it this, and at level 1, you know, level compatibility, you get routing. And if you're using level 2, you get routing and and you know, maybe level 2 brings in identity, so you can get MTLS, and at some point you add in policy telemetry and ultimately extensibility.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Because as you know, Lee entered a comment, extensibility has been very important. Lots of companies have liked the fact that you can integrate with this project at different levels. That works really well. And so, yeah. So this is very interesting. It's worthy of discussion. I don't know, you know, what it means to support multiple data planes. I don't know. It's very unlikely that we, the Istio project, say this data plane is supported. We'll fix a problem if there is that. But that's not to say that we will discourage it. So we will probably meet with them soon and talk about what are the right ways going forward. Has anyone played with this project? Has anyone here played with the project? Does anyone here want to? And the reason I ask is because I'm curious why. You know, what are the motivators for using a different data plane? And if no one here has any motivation to use it, then that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, these are the guys who probably wrote the proxy.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I think so. I think they are. So I think it would be interesting to find out from them what motivated them. My guess is there's something about Envoy that wasn't fitting their use case. That's my guess. We got some plus ones there. You know, I'm just curious behind it, and you know, what is the motivator there? And that's not to take apart those motivations, but rather just to understand them, and that will help us understand what, you know, what steps we should take.
So at Zendesk, we have a sort of an ingress tier that's 10 years old or something like that, basically based on Nginx. And as we're starting to use Istio more internally, we're trying to think about like, okay, what do we do? We want to sort of handle because our ingress tier, it does sort of like the stuff that Istio ingress does, plus a bunch of stuff like, you know, caching and, you know, kind of stuff that's Envoy is not designed to do. Trying to figure out how to make these things fit together. And one possibility is like, all right, maybe we add something either to Nginx itself or you know, sidecar or some of that effectively listens to either like reads Istio constructs directly or implements the XDS protocol. So we kind of have one, you know, so like one definition of sort of like you know, some of these rules that our Nginx can speak as well. Right. Now that this is sort of like a whiteboarding, thinking things through rather than something we've gotten implemented yet, but it's not like implementing a full data plane, but sort of having something other than Envoy participate in the, you know, at least the routing and some of the information available.
Right.
Have you thought of running maybe a Envoy sidecar with that Nginx?
We've yeah, we're considering that. I think the issue is that right now we have all of our sort of L7 path-based routing rules in Nginx. We're trying to find a way to not basically duplicate all that logic in two different places. So it might be that, for some subset of things, we just kind of forward it off to an Envoy, either sidecar or outside, that, okay, we know that stuff handles it from there. There's just
Yeah.
a bunch of gnarly little technical details that we're trying to find our way through.
Yeah, that's an interesting scenario. I think we actually have a test case to run Envoy as a sidecar for Nginx. You don't have to have Envoy to handle routing. It could be handle like secure communication for you.
We did a test. We did successfully have like Envoy as a sidecar to an Nginx pod. So it does technically work.
Yeah.
We haven't tried it at scale yet, but
Gotcha.
it's certainly not impossible.
I certainly know customers who run essentially two sidecars for historical reasons. There's some stuff in Nginx, and this is not at ingress, but as a sidecar on the workloads. Okay. And so certainly I know people who do that in production.
So it has an Nginx and an Envoy sidecar?
Yeah.
Awesome.
I hear you like sidecars. I'll put a sidecar on your sidecar. It's sidecars all the way down.
Or across.
Okay, I think that's all the item on the agenda. Does anyone have any other topics? Sorry.
So yeah, no, that's
but next
that's
time
fine.
we'll be able to demo 1.6.
I hope I can convince Megan O'Keefe to do a. I'm not sure I can convince her to do a 1.6 feature tour. Those are always so useful.
Definitely.
Yeah,
She's been doing it
we'll have her.
1.3, so
she's yeah, I know she's got a lot on her plate right now though. That's kind of her side project, not her main gig, unfortunately, because she's so good.
Wow, she's been amazing as a side project from what we can.
I know.
Yeah.
She is fantastic.
Out of curiosity, do you guys does it feel risky at all to sort of like bet Istio on Wasm? Because it feels like Wasm in Envoy, like server side, is still like promising, but it feels new. So I'm wondering if y'all feel like no, that this is solid, we're good on this, or if that's
I kind of Lynn, why don't you go ahead, Lynn?
Well, I mean, it's certainly on the roadmap for sure, but I do agree it's new. Honestly, for 1.6, I haven't checked if the WASM runtime is enabled by default now. I know in 1.5 it wasn't. So I'm looking forward to see a lot of documentation in this place. So I'm looking forward to see people start to migrate more and more of their mix of plugin to WASM, so more people involved in the space. But I think it's definitely exciting and where it's headed. So
if Louis were here, he would say yes. We have strong confidence. Much as the I know it's server side, not client side, but the browser adoption of WASM has been really really successful, and it was something that they thought a lot about for a long time, and very, very strongly end up feeling that the benefits here are fantastic. I think that we are going to see an explosion of WASM. Like it's become clear to me that we will see WASM running everywhere, right? WASM is going to be running on the edge. WASM is going to be just doing a lot.
Pretty much.
WASM out the wazoo. Yeah. So no, I don't think we think that it is mature enough that it's a safe step to make. It's becoming clear that it will be lots and lots of places, and it will just continue to perform better, continue to add more language support. Like I think that everyone feels pretty confident in adopting that ecosystem.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
and
One question there is,
I don't have a concrete reason to disbelieve that or anything like that, or
Mhm.
any like inherent, just the inherent caution I have towards new technologies.
so like, I do have a concern, but I don't have any hands-on experience with WASM yet. But my concern is more about, but please correct me if I'm wrong. I think enabling WASM heavily relies on using Envoy filters. Is that the case? If that is the case, like it also has a like potential that it would break all your sidecar configurations as well, which worries me in general there. But I might totally be wrong about that as well.
Well, I think the good thing about WASM, and one of the reasons that it was considered a fairly safe move, is that it does provide a strong sandbox. So if someone deploys a WASM module that is crashing, it does not tear down your proxy, right? That
Okay.
that module will crash, and requests that are being serviced by it won't happen. However, it doesn't bring down the proxy. It is a strong sandbox, and that in itself is, I think, one of the reasons that it is a strong requirement. One of the reasons that the team felt safe in adopting it is the fact that it's a sandbox, like a essentially like a VM is how they describe it.
yeah, I guess
It's
the
good to hear that. Yeah.
Yeah, the other thing I really like is be able to allow user to develop WASM extension in different languages, because one of the biggest problem I have with Envoy and filters of Envoy, it essentially requires you in either in C++ or in Lua, and I happen to know neither of the languages, so that's preventing me even want to learn this whole thing, other than maybe just if somebody else wrote an Envoy filter, I would just be happy to use it. But a lot of people is just intimidated. But with WASM, hopefully with the right tooling and be able to open that door so that you can pick your favorite languages to write the extension, and then you can pick what extension you use. So like in Istio, we still have a default proxy, and then you can choose like Docker image kind of thing. You can base on what extension you want to run and choose to run them. So it's going to be by your choice.
Cool. Because I'm gonna just derail the conversation a little bit, but a few weeks ago we hit an issue, but we didn't time to revisit that again. The issue was someone just created a gateway resource which was just trying to use a file mount secret which wasn't existing. That caused our ingress gateway configurations to go down, but I don't know if that is still the case. So that's why I'm just being a little bit nervous about gateway configurations and Envoy filters in general.
So which Istio version are you on?
Yeah, we were on 1.4 something. So maybe that has been fixed with the recent versions.
Yeah, so 1.4, I think the file-based gateway is the default. Is that right?
I'm not sure. Like normally we are not using that file-based one. We are relying on SDS, but some user just tried to use that.
Okay, so you're using SDS gateway in 1.4, and did you have an issue logged for this? It's because it sounds like you were saying the volume is gone.
They were just trying to use a volume that didn't have the secret at all. So they were able to mount that, but the secret wasn't there, and then it just caused our ingress gateway to fall down.
I see. Yeah, so basically we allow you to deploy something, but it wasn't configured properly. The secret wasn't generated properly. It would be great if you can actually log an issue, because the community spent tremendous effort on toolings such as Analyze, which has proved to be extremely useful to detect this type of configuration error, so that we can make sure it's improved and prevent you in the future to kind of troubleshooting after the configuration has been accepted.
Yeah, definitely we'll do that. Just it was on my task list this sprint, so I just wanted to give it another try and come up with better inputs before reporting that. But in the upcoming base, that will happen.
Yeah, thank you so much. Appreciated. And if you have time, I guess it would be good to try the existing 1.6. My guess is it's probably still there.
Yep, that is also a plan for us. Like we tried switching, at least on our sandbox cluster, we tried switching to 1.5, but it wasn't backwards compatible. And then all the sidecar injector configurations messed up a little bit. So we decided to just hold off till 1.6.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, by the way, you can't really move from 1.4 to 1.6. You still have to move to 1.5 first.
Yep, I heard about that too. That's
Okay.
the great news. I appreciate that capability as well. Yeah.
On the topic of debugging, I was wondering, does anyone know of any like tools or techniques or something like that where, like, let me back up. What I'm trying to do is trying to figure out some like subtle behaviors of like Istio and Envoy. Like if I'm in a pod that has a sidecar container, and if I try to like connect to the IP address of one, like try to establish a connection to the IP address of one service, but set a host header for a different one, like what wins and stuff like that. So does anyone know of some way that like you can kind of almost like debug a request, where you could see like, our request goes into Envoy, and because if I dump the Envoy config and I get like 20,000 lines of JSON. So trying to figure out like, all right, which path, like, which listener did it hit, or like, or which, which routing rules got triggered or something like. Does anyone know if there's a, how you would go about trying to understand how that's working?
Yeah, have you seen this? I mean, I can't claim we have perfect documentation, but we do have a good documentation on debugging Envoy, where we deep dive the Envoy configuration to help you understand how. I totally agree with you. I mean, it's 20,000 lines of YAML when you just having like a few simple services. But this deep dive, have you seen it?
Yeah, I'm aware of that. I'm kind of so that I can see what clusters exist. What
Right.
In my ideal world, I'd be like, okay, I do a curl from one container, and something lights up. So like, okay, that particular request I just did hit this, that, this, etc.
Right, exactly. That's why I was showing you this picture.
Okay, cool.
Because for me, it's like you have to kind of figure out, is it listening on this port, right? That's the request gets to the container, and where is the routes? What is the endpoints that it still recognizes? So that's how you use these commands to see whether the route configuration makes sense, whether the endpoint information are expected, and also you sometimes want to extract it into the container just to do the manual testing yourself, just to see if it's an intermittent issue. Pretty much, you also want to do proxy status, make sure your proxy are configured, are synced from Istio D to your proxy. But I do believe it's critical to run through like cluster, endpoint, and listener, all these commands, just to make sure the flows are flow correctly for you.
Okay. I mean, my feedback is that it that's required quite a bit of like deep and subtle understanding of how Envoy works and how listeners and filters and like, as like a couple months ago when I first started playing around with Istio, I didn't actually understand the distinctions of like the listeners and filter chains and that sort of thing for this to be useful. So I get it. I'm just saying that this is kind of this is already, it already assumes a fairly sophisticated background.
I agree with you. So honestly, I don't expect you to go through this. We go through this a lot because we deal with broken builds, right? But for you, at least you're trying unreleased builds. So hopefully it will be much less needs for you to go through this. The only reason you would go through this is whether it still has a bug on that particular official release that you've been using, or maybe your configuration has a bug. So either way, we would expect to either improve the project or improve the analyze and Istio CTL tooling to be able to flag the bug for you without you needing to go through this. I think the fact you are going through this is a temporary statement of, our support is not sufficient and transparent to our user, and the configuration are not easy yet, and it doesn't work 100% of the time.
Right. I think what also could be useful from a documentation perspective is like, the you have like this your requirements, like, okay, the ports need to be named and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I've got a cluster running several hundred services, and some of them don't have their ports named. That's just a fact. So like, I don't kind of saying like, all right, if not all services in your entire thing have their ports named, here's what happens if that's not the case. I've been finding some interesting, like if something if it recognizes a service as being HTTP, then like the logic chain it goes to is entirely different if it just does like goes to like the TCP pass through.
I see. So if the user forgot to declare the HTTP as the port, it would go through TCP, which is the default. What's the impact to the user, right?
Or just realistically, I have this legacy cluster that I'm not building this from scratch. I have all these services deployed on them, and like, okay, I could tell every team to go through like, okay, we have to update all the names before we can do anything with Istio. But that sucks. So I'm like, I'm in this like imperfect heterogeneous cluster of some sort of Istio already, and kind of understanding what should I expect the behavior to be would be.
Just
I know it's a large undefined problem space I'm just describing here.
No, but part of it certainly part of what we're doing is trying to finalize the protocol sniffing work so that you don't have to do that. But in the meantime, I think what you're saying, just clearly explaining if your ports aren't named, here's what it will do, will help you. Right? You won't get this telemetry, but you can have MTLS, for example. I just said it out loud. We should write that down. Like, that's a good point. That's a good point. I'm taking notes, by the way, in another talk.
Yeah, I was taking notes too. I think you are proposing a really interesting problem.
Yeah.
So for instance, one thing maybe interesting to look at is the analyze command is super powerful to analyze Istio related configuration, but maybe it's possible to extend it to evaluate the services to see, which one of them are ready to move on to Istio without configuration change, which ones should be moved on to Istio unless they move these, they make these configuration change, right? Because today we don't tell our user. I mean, they basically have to open up the YAML or examine each individual services using like the describe command to figure out which one needs to be Istio enabled with modifications.
Yeah, like my dream for this would, like, for this particular piece would be sort of like a Istio control simulate, and then I'd say, okay, here's the pod that I want to imagine simulating a request from, and here's the HTTP URL or something like that, and it would tell me like, okay, here's what would happen. Now I realize that's hard.
And what functions would you get out of Istio with this particular pod running right now?
Yeah, like where it would go and why. Okay, that's
cool.
So that's going to this. That means it hits the filter chain and recognize this as this, so therefore triggers this virtual service. Again, I'm getting into super Christmas list.
I'll just call out that Cisco had a feature in their firewalls called Packet Tracer that will do that in a layer 4 level. So it will basically tell you if there's like some blocking rule and where the path went through, just as you mentioned, highlighting where the listener hit and things like that. But that's very old.
Especially because at some point we'll probably start allowing like people outside of like our close team to like start creating their own like YAML files with virtual service definitions, and I'm sure stuff will break. So trying to like, you know, like, okay, what exactly, like when you added that rule, what exactly changed? Like, would be handy. I know Kiali is helpful in some regards to that.
Yeah, I think the cost of finding something working and not working is very high today. Well, you need a live cluster, you need to deploy. Sometimes you need multiple servers to test your flow. Sometimes you have to plug in Kiali to visualize the communication between two services to figure out what's wrong. I get your point. I mean, if we can provide some tooling without you know, gone through the whole process of deploy and running it into the mesh and be able to provide that status to you as to, you know, what functions are ready based on your current pod and services without change. And if you do make the change, what would you gain? I mean, that's really powerful.
Yeah, and I guess like to simulate, I don't know if Envoy has some way of doing that. Kind of tell, like, sort of trace a request going through it and let it know which things it hit. But you probably need some support of that at the Envoy level to have that actually work.
Well, this is a great point. I want to make sure, you know, we jog it down, and I want to make sure we can flow through some of the work group that will be relevant, and to see if we'll, you know, we can come up some interesting ideas, especially, you know, at the implementation level to help solving this for the user. And I think it's a common pain, not just for you. I mean, I'm hearing people about Istio documentation, right? I don't personally think there's a huge issue with our documentation. I think the issue comes down to when you're not using Booking Flow, when you're actually using your own pods and services, that's when you know, may have a hard time to figure out what's going on.
Yeah. I think I mentioned this in a previous meeting, but we realized after installing Istio that a lot of the services we have at our company, they use the host header in a particular way. Like the original request, like host kind of gets propagated across all the services and that sort of thing. Whereas generally it seems like Istio and Envoy assume that the host header is the destination service you're attempting to connect to. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. So
like imagine request comes into, like, you know, gmail.com or something like that, and then every microservice that, you know, bounces, like, everything said host gmail.com, as opposed to, I don't know, mail backend.cluster.local or blog store. That's like, okay, like, do we work around that with Istio, or do we tell all of our engineers to, like, okay, let's everyone change how we use HTTP headers?
So how do you route, though, in that case, if everybody using the same host header of gmail.com?
All routing is done by IP address.
The source IP or target IP? Target?
So request comes in Nginx, and Nginx figures out, you know, does L7 load balancing to figure out which upstream to connect to, and it's, you know, sends that, keeping the same host header. That goes to some microservice. If it wants to send make a connection to something else, it will, you know, do a DNS lookup, find the IP address, and send it to it. But the host header is still the original one. So the host header keeps getting passed through between all the microservices.
Okay. So basically, you're using IP-based routing, and the host header is consistent.
Yeah. I mean, we could do something where we create like a virtual service with a gigantic, match star, and then rather than doing, logic based on host headers, but it seems like Istio and Envoy seem designed to sort of like assume the host/authority header are kind of used in a particular way.
It is, as someone said before, it is kind of a name-based routing. Like I was in a meeting earlier this week. Like that is kind of the assumption.
Right.
Living life at L7.
It's a completely reasonable assumption. Just as unfortunately is an assumption that does not match the 10 years of application code we've written here.
Right.
I'm sorry, I don't know how I got on that topic, but just so what I've been trying to debug is figure out like, okay, in what cases does how does Istio Envoy behave when you're not using like a different host header than the upstream service you're trying to connect to? In what cases does that work? Like what cases does it, get routed out of the network?
Right.
Yeah, honestly, sorry, I haven't tried to actually change the host header to be something, I'm not intended to send to.
Most of the time it's the same when you're talking HTTP, but sorry for monopolizing the meeting.
No, that's okay.
Yeah, that's okay. I guess this is a very specific problem for you, maybe. I mean, if we hear more people complain, it may be interesting to take to the community to find out a solution.
Yeah, I mean, you might want to like highlight in the docs that Istio does sort of like assume the host header is used in this particular way. Now, again, I think it's reasonable. I don't think it's a bug or anything like that, but heads up.
I work with John, and I've spoke with 2 other companies who face the same challenge, and the consensus from those older folks, and that's the direction we're leaning towards, is to kind of like change our application to fit in Istio rather than mold Istio to our old legacy code. So I think that's the right path, despite being very costly for us.
Yeah, we really should be putting that in like a original host, or some other header should be propagating that information. So it goes.
Yeah, I mean, if you use some other thing to propagate, yeah, so it wouldn't generate conflict with our system.
I'm going to have to say goodbye to everybody. Thank you for the great conversation, John and John. Listen, I'm big fans of your podcast. Well, I would be if you had one. Anyway, yes, I appreciate you coming and giving good feedback. This is always fantastic. So thanks.
Yeah, really, really good feedback. Thank you, Dan.
Sorry, everybody. Got to go.
No worries.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. Do you guys, so I will take this to the doc team. So thank you so much for the feedback. Anything else you guys want to bring up?
So can I ask a non-technical question? And with non-technical, what I mean is, so maybe 2 community meetings back, we asked about the tool that would help us to inject Istio sidecars to short-lived jobs. And now there wasn't a tool that can do that in an automated way. So we build up our own tooling. So we are planning to both open source that, and also we would like to share our use case experience about how we are adapting Istio for our Kubeflow pipelines jobs. And the question part here is, what is a good way to just drive these sort of like conversations with your team in general? Like, is it okay for us to just publish blog posts on our Medium channels, or like what is the process for writing blog posts on Istio's website? So
okay, so I think I would ask, what is your goal of this work? Do you want this work to be landed somewhere in Istio? Do you want this work landed in Istio ecosystem? Or do you want landed where you are today, which I think it's your personal repo, but just get more social eminence on your work?
So the initial goal for us to enable Istio was enabling service authentication for Kubeflow pipelines, because I think internally it wasn't just providing a way, so it made sense to enable Istio there, so other services will be able to get authenticated and authorized to reach KFB APIs. And also jobs, KFB jobs also needed that too. So previously, when we inject Istio sidecars to short-lived jobs, they were just getting stuck in a state where the job is completed, but Istio proxy is still running.
Mm-hmm.
And then now we have automated that at the moment. So we feel like that this use case might be useful for people to share with. And this tool also would be used by some other folks as well, which kind of resonates like an Istio ecosystem tool. But yeah, I'm not sure about whether this should be something that we would like work with you with announcing, or we should just keep it to ourselves and like announce it on our end. So that's the part that I'm not clear about. And yeah, this unwrite preflight thing is just you need to manually inject it to each of your sidecars, but for KFB jobs, we didn't have that opportunity to just inject things manually.
Yeah, so I would say, I mean, really depends on your goal. So if you want to have it in Istio ecosystem, we can certainly help you with that, as long as the project is deemed to be related to part of the ecosystem, which I think you could potentially qualify for, because Envoy and everything, and if you allow people to plug this into the rest of the Istio ecosystem, have the reasonable documentation. For instance, I would like to see, you know, how would I use this with Istio? That would be important for us to evaluate whether it would be appropriate landed in ecosystem. And I think the fact if you had landed in ecosystem, it would make your case to write a blog on Istio.io that stronger. However, you don't have to land in ecosystem to write a blog for Istio.io. As long as your blog is technical and not about product pitching, which I don't think your case is.
Nope.
We normally would welcome such a blog. The key thing is you have to make sure the reader understand how is this related to Istio. I think that's the portion, you know, I'm missing right now. Other than I understand Envoy is here, it would be good to help user as far as their flow on how they, when and how they would plug this in. I think that would be helpful.
So the value from the Istio side is right now it is like, since Kubernetes still doesn't have the sidecar support yet, you need to just follow some workarounds to make Istio work on short-lived jobs. So this will automate things, and you don't need to just inject things. Instead, it's gonna do it in an automated way by just using another mutating web controller. So well, for us, it is not that important. Like, we can just keep it internal, and then we can just move forward with that. I'm also not clear about the value of putting this under Istio ecosystem. Like, what is going to be different for us if we put it there?
Yeah, so I think the value for you, if you guys are interested, is to get more people using the project you build, right? In fact, inside of our company, we do have user asking, "Hey, I have jobs now. Can I run it on Istio?" And the moment I look at our documentation, no, we don't support jobs, so I can't, right? So this would open opportunity for people, like if they're interested in jobs, instead of I tell them no, I can tell them, hey, by the way, check out this blog. This could be an interesting solution for you if you're interested. So it really depends on your need. I think as a community, we would actually welcome an experimental approach from you that demonstrate this can work with Istio with a particular release, and it would help you with your social eminence as well.
Okay.
Yeah, if you're interested to pursue, I think it's neat. It's a much needed problem to solve in the community, and we don't have an official answer.
Cool. Yeah. In the upcoming weeks, we need to check in with our legal team, but we already started planning about open sourcing this tool and also putting a blog post together. So
Yeah,
I will let you know about the news from our side.
Yeah, makes sense. The legal team, the license, that needs to be taken care of first. Yeah. Yeah, I will add this to agenda. I hope you guys would actually contribute this back to the community. That would be great. And get your name, well known, and people actually would give you feedback on the tool. These are the different things you can get by contributing back to the open source.
Sounds great.
Okay, we are also at the top of the hour. I really appreciate the feedback you guys have. I think we have gateway issue with SDS. It would be much appreciated if I think John might be you to open an issue on this. And we will think more about the simulate idea to see if there's anything we can improve on that. Host header, I will talk to the documentation team to see if there's anything we can highlight in the documentation. And John, you will get back to us on running short leave the jobs. Okay, thanks
Cool.
everyone.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Talk to you guys soon in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.